transform the bread from ordinary bread, and we'll call it Passover Kisnin. Last week we said that the Mefarshim don't explain clearly why it's called Kisnin according to this pshat, and we suggested that perhaps the Alter Rebbe deals with this question, but the fact that the Alter Rebbe writes here the word Koisisin is normally associated with a third interpretation. But the word Koisisin normally means that people eat a tiny bit of something. When you eat something a lot, it's called Achila. And when you eat a small amount, it's called koisisin, normally. At least one shot of it. That's the expression. So because this is a type of food that people eat only a normal amount, it's called kisnin. An alternative explanation that I've seen, which I didn't mention last week, is that some Mefarshim say that kisnin means almonds, roasted wheat. There's a certain food that's called kisnin. Now normally people would bring this type of bread together with, that's how they would serve it. They would serve this bread together with a snack called klois, ishkedim, roasted wheat and almonds. So because these foods are served together, it's called pas haba b'kisnin. Haba actually over here fits in very well. It comes together, big kisnin with the other food that's called kisnin. That's another, at least that pshat helps us understand a bit why it has this particular name. And again, this is the Shittas Rambam. Shittas Rambam, that the definition of what defines this bread different than other breads is because of the liquid that was put into it: fruit juice, milk, eggs, honey, oil, wine. And today's day and age they use apple juice, or in Eretz Yisrael they use raisin liquid, raisin, etc. And there's a discussion about the concentrate. I think we touched a bit about it last week, and we'll get back to that b'li neder. Let's continue about the second shittim. Yes, those that disagree with the first interpretation. There's about 5 different chedushim that are incorporated in this second half of just the second half of this sif. And when I say 5 chedushim, the Alter Rebbe reverses his opinion on what he writes in the Shulchan Aruch. And because it's very important when you learn to appreciate this. There's a sort of, a lot of times when you learn, you have certain axioms, certain assumptions, certain givens, how we learn. And what people often do is they take their preconceived notions and they put them into the svarim that you're learning. So this is the traditional way of understanding the machlokes about Passover Kisnin. And a lot of people fail to recognize that the Alter Rebbe slightly modified the traditional way, and this slight modification has brought about a bunch of the chedushim. The Alter Rebbe modified even compared to what he wrote in the Shulchan Aruch, and even compared to what he wrote in the Luach. And there's one fundamental difference, and every other book and every other sefer and every other malakit, most of them fail to sort of find this subtle distinction. When you learn traditionally Passover Kisnin, when it's always the way it's always taught in all schools and chadarim and yeshivas, I don't know if Chassidish yeshivas that are learning Alter Rebbe, but in the world at large, there's 3 schools of thought. What's the definition of Passover Kisnin? There are 3 independent opinions. Which means there's a machlokes. What's the definition of Passover Kisnin? Well, it's either a machlokes or they all agree with each other, whichever. There's 2 ways to learn that. And we'll just accept all the different views. It's a suffix, so we take this view and that view and the third view. And everything's Mezainis. And everything becomes Mezainis. The Alter Rebbe in the Siddur is very, very emphatic about this. There's one view which is not a mainstream view, and there's a second view which everybody agrees with. The Alter Rebbe changed the cards over here. The first interpretation of Passover Kisnin, that it means with fruit juice, that's a minority view. That's a Yesh Mefarshim. And this Yesh Mefarshim is debatable, and we'll see later on that if you're about lefish, you won't rely on this Yesh Mefarshim. The idea of incorporating fruit juice into your bread. Then there's a Yesh Cholkin, and the Yesh Cholkin, however, is the main. They disagree with the first interpretation. They bring a second interpretation, and this second interpretation, everybody agrees with. It's not as if there's a 2-way machlokes. And when it comes to the third interpretation, which we'll talk about the Mitzvah Shem also, the third interpretation doesn't even register on the radar. It just doesn't get coverage altogether. I'm giving this introduction just so we should understand where things stand. But we're talking now about theoretical concepts you haven't learned to yet inside. So let's see what the second opinion says. Yes, the second opinion maintains this, what you call Passover Kisnin, is not correct. It's a full, ordinary, regular type of bread, and you would make hamoitz and Birkas Hamazon on this bread. And Alter Rebbe adds here justification which he doesn't do anywhere else. And none of the other Mefarshim do this either. The reason why the second opinion disagrees with the first opinion, says that is not sufficient to make it, I don't know if you understand what I'm saying over here. In Shulchan Aruch just have Yesh Mefarshim, Yesh Mefarshim, Yesh Mefarshim, and that's it. Here you have Yesh Mefarshim, the Yesh Cholkim V'Oimrim, that you're wrong, and we're going to explain the Yesh Cholkim it's not just three different opinions with equal weighting.
Does it go on a stage of importance of the opinion?
Yeah, the first opinion is the opinion which is the minority opinion. Then comes the Yesh Cholkim, which is everybody will agree with. Over here at least. Ki eine doime lachmani is the Alter Rebbe is going to emperor a kasha. And if you look, if you focus carefully on the Alter Rebbe's words, the Alter Rebbe before defined as pasa baba kisnin as a food which is not made to make a meal out of it. He's going to come now to a new interpretation of pasa baba kisnin. He's not going to say it's not made to make a meal. He's going to say it's made for pleasure. Notice. People often interchange these concepts at two different things. There's an expression she'eina asuya l'kviyas suda, and there's an expression she'asuya l'idin v'tainu, that it's made for pleasure and a delicacy. They're not interrelated. When it comes to the first position, that it was made with fruit juice, the Alter Rebbe doesn't say it's made for a delicacy, and the truth is, you'll be hard pressed to say it's made as a delicacy. Just by the mere fact that you put in milk or fruit juice into your dough, it's still regular bread. It's just made with a different liquid. So it's hard to say that this became a delicacy that you're eating just for pleasure. It's a regular bread, and it's soyd alev. It satisfies you. You eat it purely to achieve satiation, to achieve satisfaction. When it comes to the second opinion of Passover Kisna, Alter Rebbe is going to mention, the second one says no, the definition is eating the tainug. It's a pleasurable delicacy. Why? 1 second, but according to the first opinion that it's made with fruit juice, it's not called pasaba, it's pasaba kisnin, because you don't normally make a meal. So why does the second opinion disagree with that? Haven't we learned earlier that any foods that you don't make a meal is called, that are not normally used to make a proper meal, is called pasaba kisnin? And we gave two examples of food. One was called lachmanios, and one was called truknin, which comes denominated by those foods that they're made with a thinner texture. They're made with a pourable dough. They're made very, very thin. So you see, and what did we say about those? We never said that they're a delicacy. We never said that anywhere. They're not a delicacy, actually. They're plain flour and water. You don't put in chazarai. Plain flour and water, nothing else added. No added additional stuff. But the very fact that your flour and water is pourable, or it's thin, it's spread out very thin, makes it into a food that's not made for Kriyas Suda. So why should pasta baba kisnin? Why? What's wrong with Shittas Rambam? The Rambam says that if you add liquid, it's called pasta baba kisnin. The Rambam is gerecht. He's right. How's that different than lachmanis and truknin? Wie Seidem Azul, the Alter Rebbe the Gemara actually puts the two together. Lachmanis and pasta baba kisnin. The Gemara is one set. So wouldn't that tell us that the definition of pasta baba kisnin has nothing to do with being a delicacy? It has to do with the fact that you don't normally make a meal out of it. It's not the bread that people use for meals. To make a meal, you use a higher, proper quality bread, which is made with flour and water. So the Alter Rebbe, you can't compare it to lachmanis and truknin. She'ein reiv b'nei adam koden suda aleim. The reason why lachmanis and truknin, most people, the Alter Rebbe uses lashon derech b'nei adam and sometimes derech roiv b'nei adam. Obviously, every time he said derech b'nei adam, he meant ein derech roiv b'nei adam. The reason why most people, obviously there are people that make a Kriyas Suda out of it. How do I know there's such people? Because we have a whole halacha. What happens? You make a Kriyas Suda. But most people don't normally make a Suda out of lachmanis. But over there, the reason is machmas shinui b'li losan li greyusa. Because there was it went down, was downgraded a level. The texture was downgraded in the sense, shabalila raka, because it's a pourable texture, a thin texture. Therefore, eina sayedes alev kol kach lechem gomer. The definition of lechem is lechem levav enishisa. The definition of bread is that it satiates, causes satisfaction to a person. It's soyd alev. If this is made with a thin texture, it doesn't have the same properties. It is soyd alev. It is, after all, lechem, but it's not lechem gomer because it's not soyd kol kach. However, when you're going to eat the so-called Mazonis bread, for argument's sake, we're going to assume that the first opinion refers to the contemporary Mazonis bread, or something close to that at least. That is bread that's soid alev, like lechem gomer, because the same exact feeling of satiation like regular bread. So that's not a good enough reason. You know, the fact that people are not kavei suda is not a sufficient thing to make it into lechem sheina gomer. It's that people are not kavei suda because ligriusa went down and regular bread because it's not soid alev. But therefore, why people don't use it for a regular meal? Because it's different, it's stylish, it's a different fashion. It's a halacha dig. They don't use it as regular bread. That's not, says the Yesh Cholk, and that's not a good enough reason. Yesh Cholk disagrees with the whole notion of the so-called Mazonis bread. Some people disagree and say Mazonis bread doesn't fit with the first opinion either. But one of the things for sure, that the Yesh Cholk for sure does not accept the Mazonis bread. So how do they now interpret what's the definition of Pasach B'Kisnin? Ella, Zogen Zeh, Pasach B'Kisnin or B'Kison, if you want to be a Daikin, the definition of Pasach B'Kisnin, Pas Gemura, is a regular bread. And here, remember, Al Tereb emphasized the word Pas Gemura. It's a full-fledged bread, meaning it's dough, kneaded with water, baked in an oven, belila ava, a thick texture. It's a full-fledged bread. You start off as regular bread, but then you do something to it. It is made in a packet style. With this style, Tereb is telling us why it's called Haba B'Kisnin. It's made like a kiss, like a packet. Although there are, and this is what Rabbi Hanehnin says this b'Feidish, although there are the Shayim that say that the word Kisnin, according to this pshat, Kisnin means fruit. Because it has a fruit filling, it could have other fillings, but fruit is one of the common fillings. It is no nafkamina in halacha, just a nafkamina of the translation of the words. According to this pshat, it's a bread with a filling in it. So whether Kisner refers to the fact that the bread is pocket style, or Kisner refers to the name of the filling, is not really germane. So you have a bread which is a regular bread. And what they do with this bread is people fill up this bread. They fill it before it's still baked. If you're going to fill it after it's baked, then you took a regular bread and you added fillings to your bread. That's not gonna. It's a moitzit. It's not gonna. You need to do something which is moitziyoi mitoidas pas. The lashon of Al Tereb later on. Moitzia pas mitoidas lechem gomer. We need to do something to take out of him his state. So when you started off from its original baking, before it's baked, you actually put in a filling of sweets, then it will change its halacha. Just to point out over here, we're talking about obviously over here about a person who wants to eat the bread. We have a halach in Hilchos Ikar and Tafel that if a person doesn't want to eat bread and he's taking the bread just because he wants to get rid of a bad taste, then the bread is a Tafel. You don't make a brach on the bread. Obviously, we're talking about over here a person wants the bread. If he doesn't want bread at all, you don't make a brach on it all together. So he wants the bread. Mitzat Sheini, he mainly doesn't want bread, he mainly wants the filling, as we're going to see momentarily. Mitzat Shlishi, bread is always considered a primary ingredient in halacha. Mitzat Revi, but since I have over here two factors which are fighting against each other, I have the koyach of bread, how powerful I want the bread, and bread is always an ikar. At the same time, it doesn't have the same properties as regular bread because one of the dinim with ikar and tafel is when things with chilas asiyasai, when they were made together to begin with, it becomes kedavar echad. It's as if the bread united with the sweets and it became like a lower level bread. And that made it go what we call the chus darga, and went down a level and turned into a mezainis. So people fill it up in mina mesika with sweets, and examples of sweets, Al Tereb says, kemoy dvash with zucker. They put in honey or sugar as a filling inside. So we're not talking about over here that it was kneaded with sugar. That would go very well with the first opinion. They put in tavlin. Tavlin sugar is also a form of a tavlin. There's sweet tavlin and there's, like it says in Tanya, there's sweet and sour tavlin. Here we're talking about you put sugar into it as a filling. I don't know how healthy it is, but as that's how it's done. Oy shkedim. Shkedim is almonds, which also gives a sweet taste. So much so that we're going to learn in one day with Hashem. In Perek, it talks about how people used to make bread, mix regular flour with almond flour to give it a different taste. People do that today with these multi-grain breads. They put in all different things instead of regular 5 types of grain instead of dagan. They call all the stuff they put in grain. When in halach, there's only certain ingredients that are called grain. But the Alter Rebbe talks about people put in kemach shkedim. Here we're not talking about where they put in kemach shkedim. Here we're talking about where they actually put in actual, real shkedim, not ground up shkedim, almonds as a filling. They're goizim or nuts. Other types of fruits. Oitavlin makes it as fruit or spices. Like we see, we use dvash and sukkar as an example. This is something that doesn't say in Shulchan Aruch. The primary ingredient is the filling. You ask people, what's the main part of this dough? The Alter Rebbe modified very much. What the Alter Rebbe did was like this. He took from the Shulchan Aruch the second definition. He made much more requirements. And mainly everybody agrees with it. In the Shulchan Aruch, this was, it just has a filling. In the Siddur, no, it has to have a filling, a sweet filling, and the filling is the primary ingredient. Once you add all these conditions, then it's not even machlokes. With this, everybody will agree. Explains Alter Rebbe, why is the filling the main thing? I don't mean the main thing in the sense that it's the majority. I mean the filling is the main thing. Ki ikra siyasa eina lamazun lasbia elin v'tainik. The reason why it's made, or the primary reason why it's made, is not to make you full, is not as a muzzin, it's made as a delicacy. Notice it doesn't say asiyasa, it says ikra asiyasa. Because after all, the person does want the bread in it also, so he does want to achieve some type of asbia, but you're asking him, which is your primary intention? Your primary intention is to have like a shmak shtikol time v'solamaza. It also achieves a feeling of lasbia. And the same way I say that the filling is the main thing, I'm telling you now the dough, Alter Rebbe says, not mazoin isa, it's both things. It's the dough and the property that the dough has, that it's mazoin, that it's zayin, that it sustains, that's a secondary property. Don't say roi, theoretically, if not for the fact that grain almost never becomes a tuffle, theoretically, if you would follow the laws of ikar and tuffle, then you would make a bracha on the milli, whether ta'etz or shahakal, whatever the milli is. So a lot of people get a food which has a filling in it, and they say, there's chocolate in it. I'm asking you, do you say that this will make it a shahakal? Of course not. It's a bit of chocolate to give it a good taste. We're talking about something which you would, in theory, make a bracha on the milli. You can't make a bracha on the milli, ela lefi she'isi mechameshus aminim she'enam nekroim mazon. Because the dough is made out of one of the 5 types of grain, which we learned early in Perek that all the 5 types of grain have a common theme that they're all called by the name mazon, and that's what making it a bracha. That's what they have a chshivas, because really the 5 types of grain, they grow from the ground. They grow from the ground. They should be Hadama. Really, it actually should become shahakal, because what do you do with them? They grow from the ground and then it's crushed, so it becomes less. And here was Nishtana Li'luya, went up a level, that it was turned into something chasha, which is mazon. And they were making it a bracha, either by the mzainis or hamaitzi. So since they are made from the 5 types of grain, which are called mazon, which have a chshivas, therefore we have halacha, eina nasas tfeila ela milui. It can never become into a secondary food. The halacha is that mezainis, 2 things. We have a halacha kish meskavan achilas agam k'mish b'ar Perek Gimel. We have a halacha in Perek Gimel that mean dagan is always the main thing. If a person wants the dagan, if it's put there for coloring, if it's put there for hold it together, then not. But if it's put there and you really want to eat this also, it's not your main intention, then it actually becomes ikar. Here the Alter Rebbe doesn't say it becomes ikar. He says the words, it doesn't become a tuffle. It actually is a halacha in Hilchos, ikar v'tuffle, but negate to grain, 2 things. Both that it becomes an ikar, and sometimes we say, okay, it's not going to be ikar, but a tuffle das ich nicht. It's a halacha when you get to soups, which is not really part of our discussion. Mele, since it can never become a secondary food, because of the combination of these factors, that it is a bread. You want to eat the bread, but the filling is the main thing, and the filling would have become the most important thing, but l'poil bread becomes the main thing, al pi halacha. It's sufficient. You don't need to have hamoitzi. It's sufficient for making a mezainis because it's gone down the level. It doesn't have the same chivas as regular bread because people don't. Over here, it's also ein derech lekvay suda, but it's not stam ein derech lekvay suda. It's ein derech lekvay suda machmas shasiyos elidin. And we have a rule that Chazal only made the rule to make a bracha hamoitzi only on foods that are normally used for a meal. This is not used for a meal, but it's not just not used for a meal. Stam azay. There's foods that are not used for a meal because it's not soyed alev. It doesn't satisfy. There's foods that are not made a meal because it's made leading the tainug. And then there's a food that that's a big machlokes about where it's not made leading the tainug. It also satisfies, but people don't make a meal out of this kind of bread because it has liquid in it. That's taka big machlokes. Here we're talking about it's not made for meal because it's taka made for pleasure. Avaloya moitzi Birkas Hanehnin. So what happens in this kind of food? This kind of food, you make it a mezainis. You don't make a bracha on the milui because the milui is the filling is secondary. Even though it is emerson, because it's grain, it becomes secondary. You don't make two brachas. The second bracha could be even a shayla of a bracha batola. You just eat the bread and it covers the filling also. And even if you eat a bit of the filling by itself also, it's also covered. You will not make an amoitzi and benching. At sheyochal shir kvi yisuda. When a person eats a shir of a kvi yisuda, then it turns to regular bread. Like the Alter Rebbe has brought in Segrayim, the Alter Rebbe gives an explanation why, if this bread is more soft than any other bread I mentioned so far. This bread is made mamish for pleasure. It's not a regular bread. It's not just a blila raka. It's really a delicacy. It's the most important thing. So how if you make a kvi yisuda all of a sudden it turns into mamish hamoitzi? So the Alter Rebbe things change. When you're going to make a meal out of it, then of course the dough becomes made because this is going to make you full. It is dough. It's a real proper dough. It's going to make you full, and you're going to eat a meal, and you're eating a last beer. It's because you're making a meal, and everything of course changes. What is the shear for kvi yisuda? Alter Rebbe doesn't say over here. But we had already earlier what the various definition of kvi yisuda, but over here we have to take into account something very important. Earlier we had a bunch of, you have to eat gimel beim, dalad beim, vav beim, chafal beim. We had a whole list of things. Depends how much you're eating. If you can be full, eat another piece of bread. But here we have a problem. You want to make something hamoitzi, but how much of it is hamoitzi? Only a small amount of it is hamoitzi. A lot of it is filling. Does the filling include in the shir? The Alter Rebbe doesn't talk about it over here. I don't know why he took it out of here, because in the luach and in the Shulchan Aruch, Alter Rebbe says, yeah, of course, you need to have an amount of kezayis b'chdei achilas pras, which that is something which is discussed later in Perek Gimel of the Islam, which could be the reason Alter Rebbe took it out, because the Alter Rebbe writes.
You said Gimel. Gimel, you said it has to have the shear of the dough that it would fit for a halacha base, but the satiety is fulfilled even with the filling.
So. Over there we weren't talking about a filling. Now we're talking about a filling which was baked with it.
So things on top of it, we said.
Over there we're talking about regular bread, or not regular bread, but you added tuna and chicken or whatever it is to it. Here we're talking about it was baked with something else. And the baked with something else becomes so much part and parcel of it that it actually changes its bracha into a mezainis because of other ingredients. So the Alter Rebbe in Perek Gimel talks about a similar case, not exactly this case, talks about a person Malachayt is connected, who has a cooked food. Well, he's talking about a cooked food over there. Here we're talking about a bread which turned from a hamoitz into the mezainis because of the filling. Over there it's a cooked food, so it's a mezainis. And in the food that's cooked, you're putting grain and other stuff also, and honey and other stuff. So can you make in this mezainis? Yeah, you can make a mezainis. Mezainis, you don't need a shear. Okay, making al michya. How much al michya you have to have? In bells, they say they're very machmir in shir al michya. The joke goes in the bells that the shir al michya is whatever fits in over here. And you put your hand on the side, and whatever fits in, that's a very, very large amount. I don't think it's such a shir to the Torah. The reason they're very machmir is because there's so much other stuff that go into the cake. The Alter Rebbe says in Perek Gimel, legabe mezainis, it's not exactly the same thing as what we're talking about over here. But if you have a kezayis b'chdei achilas pras, which means that within the amount of a pras for simplification purposes, I'll just say within every sixth is grain. The 1/6 of the mixture, pras is a larger amount, kazais is a small amount. It's approximately 1/6. So if 1/6 of the mixture is grain, then nepach kol pras lidogon, and it's as if the whole, like we say, benegay to all dinim of malchus and kares and those things, where the Torah says you only chayiv a punishment v'erik kazais. What if erik kazais of chaylev mixed in with a bunch of other things? The question is how much the ratio is. If it's 1/6, it's as if you ate, even if you didn't eat a full kazais of chaylev, but you ate a kazais of a chaylev dish, which has in it 1/6 is chaylev, 1/6 is chaylev. It's as though all of it is chaylev. So the Alter Rebbe, Shulchan Aruch, and the Luach mention this over here when they get to this Indian, that would be the shiur. They should be able to making it vitamin mezainis, to making it ala mifya. Sorry, thank you. To be able to make it moitzi b'chsamazin. Just like we say when they get to ala mifya, that we incorporate all the other foods to the shiur, provided that the ratio is.
If it's 1/6 grain to what?
To all the rest of the stuff, to the rest of the
weight,
sweets.
by volume, by what?
Percentage.
Only the cook knows that.
L'chayr it's volume, like every shir in the Torah, no? The aim of klal zeh, zog the Alter Rebbe, this, if I'm mentioning food that have fillings in it, so you would think that I'm putting them to have a special dough, which they put in a filling into it. Isa mamulus b'shumshmin, there's a dough which they put into it. Shumshman does not mean sesame over here. It means the way it's called in halacha language. Shumshman is the stuff that people put into hamatash. What is it called? Poppy seeds. Man. So the stuff that they put into the dough, in Purim they make this kind of dough. That is not included in what I'm talking about over here. What's radical over here is Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch brings the same example and writes, "Ubechlal zeh." Included is what we make on Purim. Instead, Alter Rebbe changed the definition of Passover Bekisn that the filling has to be the main thing, and with that dough, clearly the filling is not the main thing. The main thing is the dough, and if it's not included, so Alter Rebbe she'ein ikras yosam. The reason why it's made is not primarily even the tithing is not for pleasure. And lemazon last week make it full. I need to clarify something very important. We're not talking about hamakash over here. We're talking about a dough, which was the traditional dough for the meal on Purim. They would wash on this dough. And the question was if you should wash it or you shouldn't wash it. This was the bread that they served by the meal. It was like a real proper challah, and they filled up the challah with a bunch of shumshim and seeds. As you can see from a lot of places that describe the culinary method of preparing this dough of the traditional Purim menu. It's very different than our hamatash. And Alter Rebbe says this is something which was made last year. This is made as a bread. They put in a bit of filling. That's how they make it. So then obviously it's not included because my criteria over here is that the filling has to be the main thing. Now let's talk about our hamatash we have today. Our hamatash today clearly is made in the tainuk. It's made for pleasure. It might be also made lamazon lasbia. I can't say that the milli is the ikr. You know, the Alter Rebbe gave a definition it has to be made for pleasure, and the most important ingredient is the filling. We can debate that, but one thing is clear: that our dough today we make everything sweet. So to begin with, when they make this dough, they add in the dough before we get to the filling. The dough itself is a very sweet dough, and now we're going to learn halacha tes. What happens when you make a very sweet dough, which is honey and sugar? It has partially the first shit of Passover Kisnin, but it's even better than the first shit because the first shit was talking about if you put in milk, oil, honey. This is a dough which is called color sweet dough, and they make a filling which is sweet. So that for sure will be a mezainis like we'll see later in halacha tes. So that's why today's hamatashkin is many steps ahead of this hamatashkin we're talking about over here.
What is a practical example of this? But the ikir is the middle.
It's hard to find I'll tell you an example. I don't know if they make it over here today. We had in Sydney, we had a store called the Pie Factory. That was the name of the store. And all they did was made pies, which had a very thin crust. And then they put in meat, chicken, apple pie. Apple pie was totally apples inside. I don't know if they had such a thing. So there was a whole discussion, there was a whole controversy what bracha you're making it. The way they made it was that the dough was a hamaitzi dough. Today, like I said, a lot of times they make the dough to begin with is already mezainis. It's a puff pastry, but the puff pastry is very often made with margarine. Margarine is you're already going to the first in the Passover kiss. It's already very, very sweet to begin with. Today, that's how they make things. So, but if you're getting somebody that makes it not, he wants to have the real mukoi, he wants the real proper dough, and then they put in the filling, and the filling like the apple pie. So everybody agreed that even though there was controversy about the other pies, everybody agreed that's really a mezainis, because the apple pie was a big, thick filling of apple. Now, the Rebbe is going to make a very important condition here. Medvarim halaferches. Medvarim amurim. This that I say that has a filling that will transfer the dough into mezainis. This the filling is made out of sweets. Oy mine pedis. It doesn't have to be honey and sugar. You can even be fruit. Fruit is similar in the sense that nachol and eating the tiny because fruits people eat for pleasure. People don't eat fruit because they want to be full, which is negated to another halacha, which is in Perek Dalit. But what things you make a bracha when you eat a meal when you're not in a meal? So one of the things that people eat not in a meal is called fruit, and if you're making a special bracha because it's not machmas hasuda, it's not part of the definition of a meal. V'gam ein derech olam litas b'mapas. That's another thing that says about fruit also in regard to making a bracha in a meal. Fruit is made for pleasure. Also, people don't use fruit to go and eat it together with bread. So anything which is the sweet and you don't eat it with bread, that's considered a kosher filling to make into mezainis. Here the Alter Rebbe is going to argue very strong with the shittas hataz. In Shulchan Aruch, the Alter Rebbe brings two opinions and says you have a shmaim yachmer. In Siddur, the Alter Rebbe rejects the opinion of the Taz. He doesn't even get a mention. It's befedish, not like the Taz, because in the Siddur, the Alter Rebbe holds that the whole idea that it has to be made in the Taz. It's not just about having a filling. It's because the primary focus of this food is for pleasure. So if the minute you're putting in meat, cheese over here does not mean cheesecake. That's a sweet cheese. That's more sugar than cheese. We're talking about cheese, real cheese, regular cheese. So if you're making a filling from cheese, they are accompaniments that we eat with our bread. And they're masbih, they have both chesronos. Both you eat it with bread and they make you full. It's not made for pleasure, it's made to make you full. Going up to that pie factory had meat pies there. And what bracha did everybody making those meat pies? A lot of them made mezainis. And I argue very strongly, it's hamaitzi mamish. In shittas hataz, but Alter Rebbe Sid doesn't pass like a taz. And if you're following the Shulchan Aruch, then your shmai will go in the meal. In a Sid, it's like a hamaitzi gomer. It's a hamaitzi crust, and they put in meat inside. So you're eating it, why are you eating it? Lasbia, come on, the guy's eating because he's hungry after a day of work, and he wants to be full after he's eating it. Adds the Alter Rebbe, filamini yirakis. Even a lot of the berekas today, like I said, they also have margarine, they also have the berekas itself. But it could be those kind of berekas that are proper hamaitzi berekas. And then, if it has a filling, a lot of the berekas also are very thick crust. But let's say it's a thin crust, and the whole thing is, the most important thing is the milli. But the milli is what do they put in berekas? Potatoes, cheese, mushroom. They don't put a mina mesika, right? It's not a sweet thing. So then obviously it becomes hamaitzi.
And even if it's with margarine, it's only the first day.
Yeah. So what this person wanted to argue with me in Sydney was that since, according to the first opinion, if you have margarine, if it's made with other liquids, it's a mezainis. And according to the Taz, I said, yeah, but you don't have the first opinion over here. It's not made like that. It's made in regular hamaitzi. Anyhow. Or even if they put in vegetables as a filling, which vegetables, takash, ein masbiim, they don't make you full. I don't know how you're supposed to read the words over here. It doesn't make you full, but you do eat it with bread. That's how you're supposed to read it. Oya fila ain't a lifting klal. The Alter Rebbe says the truth doesn't really make a difference, even if it's food that you don't normally eat with bread. Why did this guy decide to make a filling with this kind of food? Kasher v'maisa. Normally, what fillings do you put inside? Things that people normally eat with bread. This is not something that people eat with bread. It's a food that people eat plain. But over here, they decided to make a new type of thing. We'll eat it with bread, even though it's not normally eating bread. I don't really care, but the main thing is El Shumit Varim Nanachal Lamazn Asbia V'derech Likvoy Suda Aleim. It's something that people eat, and they make a meal on them, not on the bread. On those foods. On cabbage, on spinach. There's foods that people don't normally eat. Cabbage and spinach people don't eat with their bread. I guess not. That's what the Alter Rebbe says. As an example, Shulchan Aruch. But it's something they eat for a meal. That's how you eat because you're hungry. The filling is not sufficient to go and change the status of the bread. This bread was lechem gomer. I need something. Alter Rebbe's hadgash is very strong. I need something which has the ability to take to what we spoke before in the chus darga, to take my bread which was lechem gomer and make it go down a level. The only way you could be moitzi mitoides lechem is if it's something which is made in the mitainig, it's made for pleasure, so it loses the property of regular lechem gomer. But this didn't make the bread stayed bread. You added nice stuff to the bread. Okay, fine. Why would the bread become less bread just because you added? Well, what's the Taz shitta? What does the Taz argue? Taz argues, yeah, it'll lose the status of bread. Why? So here comes something very interesting. I don't want to be meidik in this nekuda. There's a whole debate out. I'm going to leave that to have. I'll talk about a different nekuda. I don't want to leave that topic a bit later. The Alter Rebbe in Shulchan Aruch has a very interesting DinHilchos when he describes the shit that argues with the Taz. He says, "Ein bnei adam nimnoyim likvoy aleim suda." There's a lashon that we use derech likvoy suda and ein derech likvoy suda. Here the Alter Rebbe changes his lashon, writes ein roi bnei adam nimnoyim likvoy aleim suda, which means like this. Obviously, the minute you put another filling, it's not regular bread. You don't make bread with fillings. But will a person not make a meal in it just because the person put in a filling? No, what do I care? Lepoil is going to make me full because the meal I could also use for suda. So it's made. It's obviously not the type of thing that is derech lekvoy suda. You don't make a meal out of this kind of food. But you're also not nimna. You don't hold back from making a suda in it. The meal is not enough to not make a meal. And remember over here, you didn't change. It's unlike the first opinion, where the first opinion went and changed the nature of the dough by putting in another liquid into the dough. Here the dough is a full-fledged regular dough. You added a filling to it. That's not enough to take away its status of bread. And therefore you should make a proper amoitzi and benching even if you don't need kazayis. Noch mener. Even if the person says, I want it for the filling, and the bread is secondary. Says Alter Rebbe, who cares? If a person is eating regular bread and he says, but I really want the tuna, or I'm eating bread and I want other things, I'm eating bread as a secondary item. When do we say that bread becomes a tafel? When you're eating salty herring, you don't want to eat bread at all, and you just want to take away the taste of your salty herring. But im chafetz lechel gam apas, person wants bread also, but the bread is not the main thing. The bread doesn't come secondary. You make a mamish hamoitzi. So you want to have mainly the meat. Well, why can't you want to mainly have the meat? It is bread. So still will be Birkas Hanehnin, because even a plain kazais will be Birkas Hanehnin. Well, in halach, I just want to finish at least 3 lines. At least even if you can't finish it inside, let's say it balpeh. But Alter Rebbe is going to say is like this: I brought you 2 opinions, and let me tell you what you should do. If you come across a dough which is kneaded with other liquids, al pidin, you can go like shit saram and make it in mezonis. Because the shayla with the rabbanon. Once your kvi suda comes to shayla v'amoitzi, but so long you're not in the kvi suda range, so the rabbanon shayla. The rabbanon shayla should be mezonis or hamoitzi. Follow the makel opinion, which is interesting. Why it's called the makel opinion? Why is that more makel? Well, it's a shorter bracha. Alamich is definitely shorter than Birkas Hanehnin. So it's a make the pin, and we'll see a bit more mitzvah next week about that. So therefore, al pi din, you could follow the pin to making it mezonos. But a Baal Nefesh is not going to accept that because the Baal Nefesh will say that the Yesh Chokin is a very valid, legitimate argument. This is not made l'idum v'tainuk. The only time a Baal Nefesh will agree if it's made with honey. If the liquid that uses honey, that's something that makes the whole thing into a sweet food, and it's taka made for sweetness, then they'll agree taka making it mezonos. Masheng the second minute when it's fulfilling, everybody agrees it's mezonos.